Good afternoon and welcome to this i24 News special edition. Today, the 4 French Jews who were killed in last week's terror attack on a kosher supermarket in Paris will be buried at the Givat Shaul cemetery in Jerusalem. The bodies of the victims, Yohan Cohen, 22, Yoav Khatab, 21, Philippe Baram, 45, and François Michel Saada, 64, arrived early this morning at Ben Gurion Airport. They were killed last Friday when Amedi Koulibaly stormed the Hyper Kasher store and opened fire. This followed an attack earlier in the week on the head office of the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine, which left 12 people dead. In the aftermath of a 3-day ordeal, an outpouring of support has come from all corners of the globe, embodied by the widespread adoption of the slogan, Je suis Charlie. On Sunday, a mass rally was held in Paris, attended by more than 1 million people and 40 world leaders. Joining me now in the studio are Colette Avital, a former Israeli deputy ambassador to France. Thank you for joining us. And Yossi Frankel, a volunteer of Zaka. The funeral actually began. We're going to go to some live images from the scene at the moment. Live image, there we are, where the funerals will begin shortly. Of course, we're going to receive live updates from our volunteers. We see Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, we know President Reuven Rivlin, we also see the head of the opposition, Isaac Herzog, all attending the funeral. Now, before we begin with our guests in the studio, we'd like to have a short recap of this past week's horrific terror attack in Paris.
Vous avez 3 hommes en armes qui ont investi les locaux de Charlie Hebdo, Kalachnikov, fusil à pompe.
Et nous avons donc engagé le plan Vigipirate attentat.
Il y a 12 personnes disparues, 8 blessés, dont 4 en situation d'urgence absolue.
Selon un témoin, les tireurs criaient Allah Akbar et affirmaient vouloir venger le prophète.
Quel prophète? Leur prophète, c'est Satan, malheureusement.
Un policier, en toute occasion, saura s'interposer lorsqu'il faudra qu'il protège la nation.
Actuellement, une opération est en cours.
Un individu de type africain porteur d'une Kalachnikov a été signalé présent là à hauteur du 23 avenue de la Porte de Vincennes. Et d'après la gérante qui est à l'intérieur et de sources policières, il y avait des morts.
Dans le moment où nous sommes, nous devons tout faire pour assurer la protection de nos concitoyens. On sera capable aussi de résister à toutes les épreuves.
Thank you once again for joining me, Ambassador Avital and Mr. Frankel. Before we begin, we're going to get a quick update from our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev, who is in Jerusalem right outside the funeral. Tal, what can you tell us from there?
Well, good afternoon, Michal. Thousands of people have gathered here at the Har HaMenuchot cemetery in Jerusalem, and the ceremony is expected to start shortly. Everyone is paying their final respect to the 4 victims of the Hyper Kasher attack on Friday in Paris, and the coffins of the 4 victims, Yoram Khatab, Yohan Cohen, Philippe Baram, and François Michel Saada, arrived early this morning.
Seems like we've been cut off, so we shall begin, and we'll be back later with live coverage from the funeral. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with you, Ambassador Vital. The families decided to bury the victims in Israel while they still live in France. Some of them might make Aliyah, but at the moment they're all living in France. Could this possibly be because of their anger towards the French government?
I don't think so. I think that probably it denotes also of their attachment to Israel, to what Israel represents, to what this land represents. But I really like to use this opportunity to present my condolences. I'm sure everybody feels like me, to the families, and I do know that one of the victims of the attack is the father of one of the producers here at this station. So from all our heart, I think this is a sad moment for all of us.
Indeed. Thank you. It is a very sad moment also for all of us at i24 News. Mr. Frankel, which brings me to you, Zaka. I think you probably have one of the most difficult jobs in the world. You're the first to arrive at most crisis scenes to give the immediate response. What can you tell us a little bit about the procedures and about Zaka, what you stand for?
Zaka was founded in 1979 when a terrorist boarded the 405 bus, which travels across Kvish Echad, where the terrorist actually approached the driver, pulled the steering wheel to the right, which rolled the bus over the ravine, killing 17 people instantly. Since its inauguration, we've branched out into many different divisions, whether it's from rescue to standard life-saving. We're first responders under Magen David Adom. We run by the slogan of saving those who can be saved and honoring those who can't.
Are special measures taken for victims of terror?
For sure. Special measures are taken when everybody runs away from a terrorist scene. We're the ones actually running into it. It's not an easy thing for us. It's one of the hardest things, and what gives me more courage is actually seeing our fellow members, standing side by side to support each other.
Before I talk about the victims, I do want to talk more about the volunteers. It must take a psychological toll, and what I'm wondering, you are a volunteer. How do volunteers deal with the psychological standpoint based on this line of work?
I'll put it like this: when we go out and save a life, I know that person can turn around and thank us. But if I'm getting that call for a dead person, I know if that dead person is going to turn around and thank me, I'm going to run the other way. The only way that we actually support ourselves and deal with the crisis is once we deal with a major disaster. For instance, the Har Nof shooting, 2 days after the terrorist attack, we had a divuv. We had a briefing where we actually sit down with trained professionals, psychologists, to debrief us on the situation, which helps us. But the most important thing to know is that every member supports each other. We are one family.
Now, for our viewers and for all of us to understand maybe and have a little insight into your work, can you tell us about the procedure from Paris until the moment the bodies arrived, the victims' bodies arrived here in Jerusalem? If you can take us through just a little bit.
Sure. Friday afternoon, we heard of we've initially heard of the terrorist attack, at which point my counterpart, Mati Goldstein, who happens to be the head of the Zaka international teams, was dealing with finding out how many members there were, how many victims there were, dealing with the foreign ministry, dealing with our members on the scene. Zaka actually have 26 different countries where we have teams. France is one of them, and our members were on the scene pretty much right away, and they were relaying back to us, whether it be myself or my counterpart, Mati, regarding the incident and regarding what's going on. After Shabbat, we had another briefing with Rabbi Yehuda Meshizav, who's the chairman, otherwise known as the angel behind Zaka.
Incredible person, really.
And thank you. And it was decided on Sunday we will get the flight at the 5:30 flight Lal to Paris, which would get us there about 9 o'clock in the evening. 9:30, my guys were already, my Israeli team was already on the scene at the Hippokosha supermarket. Once they got in, they did the holy task of collecting the remains. Now, something that you should know, being over here in Israel, we don't see this. But when my members walked into the Hippokosha, people were just astounded, from people from all walks of life, whether religious or whether not. Those who don't even know anything about religion were there to support their Jewish brethren. And the most amazing thing that actually happened there was they all supported our members who were going in there to do the holy work, unknown to what they're going into, how bad the scenes are. We're going in with the support from the public, we're going in with the support from our communities, and that alone helps us to get through it. Once we finished with the cleanup, the bodies, our teams went then to the equivalent of Abu Kabir, the forensics department there, to deal with the cleanup, so to say, over there, to prepare the bodies for transport to Israel to be buried. In fact, to note, my teams are still there, still dealing with the cleanup.
Okay, and we're actually going to go to some live footage now from France. I think we have a feed. Here we are. We can see a memorial ceremony that is also taking place at the moment. Ambassador Vital, if we stick still with the experience of the victims, and we can see, sorry, a moment of silence here taking place in France. Ambassador Vital, the victims are experiencing this grief, and their funeral, which is something very personal, has become something of a national scale, something maybe politicized. Do you think, in a way, it's coming at the expense of the bereaved families, this large national scale ceremony?
No, I think that, first of all, I have to say that I am moved. I'm moved by everything that I see, and I'm moved that the scene that we see now at soldiers standing on guard for the funeral. And I think that it must be a comfort for the family. Obviously, you know, many scenes have passed through my head. During the second Intifada, many of us would go out in the morning, go to a supermarket or go to a restaurant, and we never knew if we would come out alive. And I remember that on a daily basis, and I remember so many of my friends and people that I knew well getting killed. And you cannot help but think of those people who went on a Friday innocently in a supermarket, not even fancying or dreaming that this would happen to them, or to their families couldn't realize it. And I think that the fact that there's so much public support, and you see both what has been happening in France to pay them tribute and in Israel, I think this must be a comfort to the family. Obviously, there's nothing that can really be a consolation to somebody who's lost her father or her husband, or who's remained alone with children and doesn't know what to do next. But I think that the way to pay tribute to those people is something of great importance, and I really and truly do not wish to mix any politics in it. I think we are doing the right thing by bringing them to funeral here. The French government has done the right thing. Let us just keep their memory alive.
Definitely, it's important to remember that it is a very emotional day, and it shouldn't be made political. However, you did spend time in France, and you're familiar with the culture and with the people, and you speak French. Did you ever imagine that the situation, especially for French Jews, could deteriorate this much? French Jews are running away. They're seeing Aliyah as a necessity.
Yes, well, you know, I would prefer to see Aliyah not as a necessity, but an act of faith and Zionism, and not only running away from something. And I'm not sure that this is the right way to encourage them to run away. By the way, by encouraging people to run away, it's also in a way conceding to terrorism and telling the jihadis that they have won in this particular case. But I would like to say something. You know, when I was in France, I was there in the 80s, and that was during the Lebanon War. And there was hardly a day without an incident, without an act of terrorism. Many of those were addressed or aimed, targeted at Israeli diplomats and so on. I was there when some of my colleagues got killed. One of my colleagues at the embassy, I saw him on a Saturday morning when I went to pick up my mail and my newspapers, and 5 minutes later he was assassinated. That was a very tough time, and there was also an incident at one of the restaurants, the Goldberg restaurant. So it's not that it's getting worse. It is the anti-Semitism has been growing, but it has been changing its face. And I think it is important for us to understand two things. First thing is that most of anti-Semitic acts today in Europe and elsewhere, 80% are carried not by the Catholic French people, but by the Muslims. And this is a new phenomenon, and unfortunately, every time that there are incidents or wars in the Middle East, this becomes worse. And the second thing I think to remember is the fact that we're not the only targets in this particular case. What is being targeted? Yeah, what is being targeted is Western civilization. And we are one of the targets. That again doesn't make it any better for us. But I think it is important to see the general context, to see that it is again targeted also against governments.
Yeah, I'd like to talk more about the nature, whether it's anti-Semitic or really an attack on people. But we're going to a phone call we have with Paris. Jonathan Chefetz, who is the Israeli emissary of the Jewish Agency, joining me now on the phone. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello again.
Hi, thanks for joining us. What's the latest? I know that the last time you spoke with us, you said that the Jewish community is in entire shock. Of course, you're there supporting Aliyah, but what can you tell us about these past few days and your activities and the community and how they're dealing with the situation?
As a director of the Shomer Tzair movement, which is the youth movement in the community, we spoke with our counselors, we spoke with our younger kids about the situation. We didn't have an activity last Saturday due to security reasons, but we still had an activity with our counselors. It's a hard atmosphere, especially today. We're all a bit sad and thinking about those who have died in the past events. But with all of that, and the fact that the Jewish Agency is supporting Aliyah, we're also thinking about what's next. What's the future for the Jewish community here in Paris?
Which is also very important. And what can you tell us? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, continue.
And, with the race, sorry.
Yes, Jonathan, what can you tell us about dealing with the French community that does want to stay in France, that feels connected to Israel, but sees their life in Paris, in France, as a French Jew, which should also be possible for those who want to stay in their homeland?
So yesterday we had actually a meeting with most of the youth movements here in Paris. And after 30 minutes of talking about security, we started talking about what's next. And I think that the first thing that came to everybody's mind, and I was sure that I was the one who's going to propose it, as someone who's coming from Israel, we talked about dialogue. We talked about how we're going to reach now the Muslim community. And I think there's a French philosopher, Bernard-Henri Lévy, who spoke about the fear of Islamophobia and the fact that he doesn't want to see the French nation and the Jewish community going against the Muslim community right now here in France. But I think that the main thing is that there are a lot of people who are saying we're here to stay, we're here to fight our lives, and we won't be afraid and frightened by terror, and we will stand our guards in front of the Islamic terror, the radical Islamic terror who came to our front door.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Chefetz from Paris. Now, Mr. Franke, we're going back to you. We're going to show some live footage from the funeral. Can you explain to us maybe a little bit from a ritual standpoint what we're seeing taking place at the funeral and what we can expect?
Well, the the services that we're seeing at the moment right now, if I'm not mistaken, is the
mayor of Jerusalem.
The
mayor of Jerusalem.
Yeah, the mayor of Jerusalem, together with
one of
the I think the family members
seems,
of the terrorist attack. Now, the way we would work at the funeral is the bodies are brought out, as we saw earlier. Our proud members, 4 per body, bringing them out to the stage, or to the platform, I should say, followed by Kaddish. We would also have, and because of the intensity of this specific funeral, we have different dignitaries speaking as well, giving their eulogies. But then we would also have the Keil Malei Chamim, which is the mourner's prayer, so to say. And then we will actually take the bodies to bury them into in the ground. And the reason why we do that is because of one of the things that the Torah says, which is when the same way a person is brought into the world, so too shall they return. And because we're originally made from fire, water, and dust, so we return to the ground, which is what we are going to see throughout the.
What you see now is the widow of one of the victims of.
And maybe we can hear some of the funeral. Are we going to go live? Yeah, we're going to go live so we can hear some of the eulogizing.
היה בן אדם.
Was a person.
Perfect.
Was a perfect man.
איך שאמרתי כבר, בן אדם שחושב קודם.
A person that thought first about others before
עצמו.
he thought of himself.
בעל מעולה ואבא.
An excellent husband. And the father who loved his kids and lived only for them. Today, he's together with my son. I cry, but I know that you all cry with me. And I thank all of you for all of this. I wouldn't believe all of this.
Protège-moi, protège Chirel et Naor et là et Raphaël.
That was the wife of the widow of Philippe Baram. A very emotional day. Their life changed in an instant, and it's a difficult time to think about tomorrow. Everyone is still in a state of shock. The Jewish communities are in a state of shock in France and in hysteria. But the former, Jonathan Chefetz, spoke about interfaith dialogue, which actually now is a time, and I wonder if this is so. I know that the current Israeli ambassador to France in Paris, Yossi Gal, hosted an interfaith dialogue group of Muslim and Jewish leaders these past few months. Are Jewish and Muslim relations doomed in France, or maybe this is a time to actually promote such initiatives?
I think that the relations are not doomed, but I think that if we're speaking of relations that are doomed, let's not forget that there are also very difficult relations between moderate Muslims and the jihadists, that many of the moderate Muslims also feel powerless, also feel in a way victims, and some of them indeed have been killed in France and elsewhere.
Absolutely, but
so
could modern Islam lift its head up above the law? Could this be their moment?
That is the very question, and I'm not sure that this is the case, because by definition, when you're moderate, you don't speak up, you don't speak loud, and it's very difficult. I think that what we're seeing here is a trend in Islam which has developed over the years, and that they have today a strategy which is called the Quran concept of war, which was written in a book by a Pakistani by the name of General Malik in the 70s and espoused by many of these groups. It's not new. There have been extremist Salafis, but what we're seeing today is really almost a political strategy, a political theory, in a way like Nazism was at the time. So I think it takes more than interfaith dialogue with the moderates. It's very nice, but I don't think it will help very much. Maybe it will help in the long run through education. What I think is one has to figure out what one has to do, what kind of resolve one has to take in order to combat this kind of a scourge, which in many ways is malignant. What we're talking about is something which is malignant and which has taken over also some of the Arab world. Let us not forget it.
And perhaps the burning question in Europe would be, is Europe and is France prepared and able to tackle extreme Islamism?
I think France is, but I think that France alone cannot do it. And again, the difference is that today in those countries, many of the people who carry out these acts of terrorism are French citizens or German citizens or Norwegian citizens and so on. So I think it takes much, much more than that. It's not only France. It has to be an international cooperation of polices and of intelligence and of putting on the table different means of combating this. And basically, I think, it's a big word to say, but this is a war of civilizations.
Now, what you're saying is that there should be a collective reaction, a global fight, which I guess there is.
And there's going to be
already.
And there's going to be.
But the question is, in Europe, could this lead to the rise of the other extremism, of Islamophobia, of right-wing? How? Last evening in Germany, there was an anti-Islam rally. At the end of the day, the immigrants in France don't want immigration laws to change. They would be the first victims of this. And the question is, how do you deal with extreme Islam without, going to the other extreme of fascism and completely taking away people's
I think in many ways, the same way we're talking about it in Israel, and excuse me for saying this and making a parallel, we have to combat extremisms on both sides. But basically, I think maybe what is important to understand is that it's not just extremism that will come up, and it will come up. Probably what we will see as a political phenomenon is the rise of fascist and of extreme right-wing political parties. Already in France, you see Marine Le Pen.
The next election is 2017.
Probably you will see, I really don't want to be a prophet here, but you see already the rise of Marine Le Pen, to what level she has come. You see that in Belgium, and you see that in Denmark, and you see that in Germany, and so on. So basically, the question is also, at this level, a political question: how will moderate political parties and left-wing political parties combat this kind of fascism?
Absolutely. Well, hopefully moderate Islam will take a stronger stance, but again, we will have to wait and see. And this is not the first time the Jewish community is being targeted. No major changes were made. Do you think
yes, major changes have been made. If you have today 5,000 soldiers protecting...
now major changes are made, but until now, governments didn't
act enough.
Not enough. And the question is, can France deal with this new reality? As you said, 5,000 soldiers deployed, 10,000 have been deployed, 5,000 just for Jewish institutions. Is this the new reality for France?
Unfortunately, it is. The question is how long it will last. The question is how long the French will carry on this kind of vigilance. And the question is, if I was a Jewish kid, would I like to live like that? If I was a Jewish parent, would I like my children to be all the time surrounded by policemen? So it's not a normal situation. I think it's a good thing that Jewish targets are being protected. But I think in the long range, combating terrorism and undoing terrorist cells is as important as what we see as protection today.
And what about society and the societal divide that's already apparent? A lot of attacks on Muslims these past few days as a result. What should the French government do? How are they supposed to react? There's been a divide. Things have deteriorated, and there are entire neighborhoods where the police force is even afraid to enter. How do they tackle this? Oh, we're going to go live. Before we answer that question, President Rivlin speaking at the funeral. Please.
Position. Minister of Environment and Energy of France is Ségolène Royal, the first of Zion, Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef, first Rabbi of Israel, David Lau, ministers, members of Knesset, dear ambassadors, distinguished guests, families Khatab, Cohen, beloved families, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience. Johan, Philippe, François Michel, this is not the way we wanted to receive you in Israel. This is not the way we wanted you to come to Eretz Israel. We wanted to see you come back home to the state of Israel, to its capital, Jerusalem. We asked for you alive. We asked for you alive. In these very moments, I stand in front of you with a broken heart, hurting, and with me stands crying an entire nation. Philippe, you wanted, we were told, to do shopping for Shabbat. And what's more Jewish than shopping on a Friday for the Holy Shabbat? My father, the hero, your son is crying now. He was murdered only because he was Jewish. This is what he says. What can we tell your wife, Philippe? What can we tell your 3 young children who will cry out, Father, and their cry will remain orphaned? François Michel, the apartment you bought here in Israel is ready for you. You wanted so much to do Aliyah, to live here with us. But you're not going to place a mezuzah in your new apartment. It was said, who is the man who would build a new home and will not go into it, will go back to his home unless he dies in a war? This is the word of the Torah, and now war has come to you. The hand of the assassin finished it all. Yoav, 2 weeks ago you were here in Jerusalem. For the very first time, you visited the Wailing Wall. You took a picture of you with the flag surrounding you. Now you come here for the second time. And, oh God, the last time. You return as a Jewish hero, as one of us. Johan, you could have run away, but no, you didn't give up. You struggled against the murderer in order to save the life of a young child, 3-year-old. You succeeded in your struggle, but you paid for it with your life. Only 20 and already a hero, a soldier of the Jewish people, dear families, the entire home of Israel. Philippe Baram, Yoav Khatab, Johan Cohen, and François Michel Sada were assassinated on a Shabbat evening in a kosher, hyper kasher, in cold blood because they were Jewish. The assassin made sure that it is a Jewish place, and only later did he assassinate the people. This is pure evil, terrifying. It wakes memories, terrible memories. This is a hating of Jews. It's deep, it's dark. It pierces. It tries to strike us wherever we are, wherever we have Jewish lives. In Paris and in Jerusalem, in Toulouse and in Tel Aviv, in Brussels and in Mumbai, in the streets and in the synagogues, in schools and in the neighborhood grocery store, in the train station and in the museum. Like many others, I watched the millions marching in the streets of France together with you, your Prime Minister. It was a show of sympathy that warmed the heart. The past weeks and months proved that terrorism does not differentiate blood from blood. Still, we cannot ignore that this terror chases the people of the Jewish people, wearers of tzitzit, wearers of yarmulkes, those who eat kosher, who pray in synagogues, and babies from the house of Rabban. It is dangerous to forget that this is anti-Semitism, whether it is old anti-Semitism or new anti-Semitism. It doesn't make a difference what are the twisted motives of the terrorists. The leaders of Europe, Madam Minister, must act actively and take a strong hand to regain the sense of security of the Jews of Europe in Toulouse, Burgas, and so on. It is impossible that in 2015, 70 years after the end of the Second World War, Jews are afraid to walk with a yarmulke on their heads and the tzitzit in their clothing in Europe. It's impossible that every other day we hear of distortion of Jewish cemeteries, of communities under attack. It is impossible to ignore anymore. We cannot be forgiveful. We cannot be forgiving against wild anti-Semitism. Violence and ignorance will not disappear on their own. My brothers, members of the Jewish community in France, in the last few years, the connection between the Jewish community in France and the State of Israel is becoming stronger. Its citizens, the citizens of Israel and the people, this connection is in happy days and terrible events. Here we stood together here and joined for eternal rest Miriam Onsengo and the Rabbi Yonatan Sendler and his dear children Gabriel and Maria. Only in the last summer the nation of Israel stood as one person, and in the funeral of Jordan Simon, a lone soldier born in France. I met Yamin and Josiane, the parents of Jordan, and Lorraine and Karen, his sisters, when they were sitting in a shiva in the city of Ashkelon. I met special people, families filled with love of Israel, with love of Jewish tradition, and love of the state of Israel. In these sad moments, I learned how we are really one people, how important it is for us to remain together, close to each other, despite the distance. Today, we are brothers, members of the same family, a people that bows, cries out, and tears. This is the connection that the days and borders cannot surpass. It is a connection of blood and of spirit. A lot was said since the murder of the Aliyah of the Jews of France. My dear brothers, citizens of France, Jewish citizens of France, you are very welcome. Our country is your country. Our home is your home. Our arms are open and our eyes are waiting to see you come back to Israel. But coming back to Israel should not be under crisis, under these terrifying moments. Terrorism cannot win, and it never won over us, and we don't want terrorism to win over you. The land of Israel is the land of choice. We want you to choose to come here from love. Dear families, above the graves of your loved ones, you have Johan, Francois, Michel, and Philippe. We promise you, we will continue to struggle for your right to live as Jews wherever you are. We'll continue to struggle for your right to open and to light up your synagogues, to educate children with the Torah, of the love of Israel and of the correction of the world. Jewish blood cannot be spilled unpunished. The blood of people cannot be. The land will not cover the blood. Nothing will heal the pain. Here, between the mountains of Jerusalem, on the Har HaMenuchot, you are buried here. Brothers who came from far away, brothers from France, but also sons of Jerusalem. May your remembrance and may God avenge you.
That was President Reuven Rivlin eulogizing the victims of the Paris attack. We're going to get a quick update from our correspondent Danny Swibel, who is at the funeral. Hi, Danny. Thank you for joining us. What can you tell us from inside about the mood after these very, very charged and painful words?
Michal, sorry to interrupt. Actually, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, will be going to the microphone,
we'll
so we will be listening to him right now.
All right, going live to...
אישי נשיא המדינה ראובן ריבלין, יושב ראש האופוזיציה,
the head of the opposition, Member of Parliament Yitzhak Bougie Herzog, the Minister of Environment and Energy of France, Mrs. Ségolène Royal, the chairman of the Jewish Agency, Natan Sharansky, the first of Zion, the Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef, and the mayor and the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Lau, ministers, members of Knesset, ambassadors, leaders from France, and representatives of the General Assembly, the mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, the people of Israel, and above all,
She's going to speak as well. She has a speech.
our brothers and sisters,
Yeah, I see. She has a speech.
my brothers and sisters from the family of the bereaved. Here we saw how big your pain is, how terrible your grief is. When I held you in Paris, I told you that I know your pain, the pain of spouses, of parents, the pain of children, of brothers and sisters who lost what they cherished the most. And this is the way
ומדינת ישראל
the
כולה
nation of Israel and the state of Israel
מחבקים אתכם
are holding you, embracing you with love
ביום זה בו
on this day in which 4 new graves
נכרו באדמת
were
ירושלים.
buried in the ground of Jerusalem.
הם ישמשו כמקום
They will be
מנוחתם האחרונה
the last resting place
של פיליפ,
for Philippe,
של יואב,
Yoav,
של יוהן
Yohan,
ופרנסואה מישל,
and Francois Michel. May they rest in peace.
4 אנשים יקרים,
4 dear people,
ישרי דרך,
honest,
אוהבי אדם,
with love for men.
4 אנשים
4 people
שכמו הקורבנות
who are like the other victims from Toulouse who are buried here were assassinated only because they are Jewish.
חייהם נגדעו
Their
בהתקף
lives
של
were
מרצח
ended in a moment of hatred by a terrible assassin.
אבל לא נכביר מילים
But we shouldn't talk too much
על הרוצח
about the damned assassin,
וגם לא על הרוצחים
and not
האחרים
about the other murderers
שקטלו חפים מפשע
who
נוספים
killed
על
the
אדמת
lives
צרפת.
of innocent in France,
כן מעשיהם
because their deeds
הם שמעידים על קנאותם
show
הרצחנית.
their bigotry, their murderous bigotry.
זאת הקנאות המורעלת של
It is the bigotry
תנועות הטרור של האסלאם
of
הקיצוני
the fundamental Islam terror movement
שמחוללות
that
מעשי
create
זוועה
terrible
בעולם.
things all over the world.
אני אומר שנים רבות ואומר
I've been
זאת
saying for many years, and I'll say it again here today.
אלה אינם רק
These
אויבי
are not
העם היהודי.
the enemies of the Jewish people alone. These are the enemies of humanity,
והגיע הזמן
all of humanity. And it's time for all of civilized man to join together
אויבים
and
אלה מתוכנו.
cut from the root these enemies from amongst us.
שבתי אתמול מפריז,
I returned yesterday from Paris.
השתתפתי בצעדה עם
I was in a march with leaders from all over the world.
אני חושב
I think that
שרובם מבינים,
most of them understand,
או לפחות מתחילים
or
להבין,
at least beginning to understand,
שהטרור הזה של
that
האסלאם
this terrorism of fundamental Islam
זה איום
is a
ממשי
real threat, a tangible threat
העולם בו אנו
for
חיים.
the security and peace of the world in which we live.
שם בפריז גם
And there in Paris, I also
נוכחתי שוב
attended or saw again
עוצמת הרוח
the strength
וחום הלב של
and the warmth of the community of the Jews of France, a community that contributed so much to France
שהיא מחוברת
and which is connected
בכל נימי נפשה
from the mirror of its heart to the people of Israel, to the Torah of Israel, and to
זהו החוט המשולש
land of Israel.
שלעולם לא
This is
נקטע,
the cord that was never cut,
שהבטיח את קיומנו
that promised our existence,
ושהוא סוד
and which is a secret, the secret of our
לכן במעמד זה
resurrection.
שנתמקד
So in this,
הגדולה של
today we should focus on the spirit that lies here, the spirit that says,
לעולם
never,
ינצחו אותנו.
you will never
סוד
win
כוחו
over
שלנו,
us. It is the strength of our people, its internal unity, the faith,
הערבות ההדדית שקושרת
and
זהו מקור העוצמה
that ties us all. It is the source of our strength, of an ancient people
כל מכשול ומיצר
that overcame every peril
לקום מעפר.
and resurrected from the ashes.
וברוך השם,
And bless the Lord.
תסתכלו סביבכם,
Look around you
כאן בהרי ירושלים.
here in the mountains of Jerusalem.
הנה היום יש לנו מדינה משלנו,
We have a country of our own,
פורחת ומתקדמת,
a flourishing
שמפיצה
country,
אור גדול
a country that sheds, that is a
כמגדלור מוסרי
beacon,
לעולם.
a moral beacon for the rest
מדינה
of the world,
שלוקחת את גורלה בידיה.
a country that takes its fate in its own hands. And our president was right by saying that the Jews are allowed to live in many countries, and their right is to live everywhere in the world with complete security. But I believe that they know in the depth of their hearts that they have one country, one land, the state of Israel, which is their historical origin, and will welcome them as loved brothers and children. Today, more than ever, Israel is the real home of all of us. And as many we will be and united in our country, we will be stronger in our country, in our one country. And this is the hope of the Jewish people. May the soul of Philippe, Yoav, Johan, and Francois Michel be part of the story of life in the flourishing of our country, in the building of our country. May they rest in peace.
So a very emotional set of speeches here in Jerusalem. Back in the studio, maybe Mr. Frankel, you can tell us a little bit about the emotional. How do you deal emotionally with the victims? How do you support them and offer them the emotional support needed? And also, is it different to react to such an attack that happened in an event that happened in such a brutal and aggressive manner? What kind of support do you offer the victims that some of them, the family of the victims that some of them we saw in the funeral now?
Well, Zaka have a team of counselors that we have access to in the aspect of family support and to notify the families. I mean, when a disaster happens, not always do we know who the victims are, and through our forensics and through our work, we're able to identify the people. We would then go and notify the families through our specialized units for this, for the victims themselves and for the families. In that aspect, it's a team of probably about 15 to 20 people that would actually console the families and sit with the families, and we don't just support them in the emotional aspect. We also help prepare the families for the Shiva. For the 7 days of mourning, we'll supply the chairs. The chairs of mourning will supply the Torah scrolls, will supply the Sidurim, and any necessities that the family needs for the Shiva, we will supply as well. So Zaka's has a massive variety of different units to be able to support the different needs in times of crisis.
Very difficult times indeed. We're going to go back live to just hear the prayer, and then we'll have one more question from Ambassador Vital. Very difficult day in Jerusalem, and I think for French Jews and for everyone who believes in the same values, world Jewry, but not only. Maybe we can touch a little bit upon the speeches of President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu. They both mentioned Aliyah in different ways, you can say. And the question is this the right time to encourage Aliyah? What statement is this bringing forth?
First of all, I'm all for Aliyah. It's obvious. I mean, this is the gathering of Jews has always been a strategy, the strategy of the State of Israel, and when I was a member of parliament, I was the head of the Aliyah and Absorption Committee. So obviously, I'm telling you where my heart is. I'm not sure that this is the right moment, depending how you do it. Yes, we are an open country, and yes, hopefully this is the country where most Jewish people will choose to come. This is our Zionism, but I think that the way certain things were put in the past few days, telling the Jews of France that Israel is the only safe place for them, is really slapping the French president and the French people in their face. It's telling them you're incompetent. And I'm not sure that this is the right thing to do. Just imagine, we were speaking of the Intifada, that during the Intifada, when all of us every day suffered in Jerusalem, we would have had the Prime Minister of France coming to one of the funerals or after one of the incidents and telling all the people who were of French descent, leave Israel and come to live in France. I think that there are certain very thin nerves, very, very sensitive nerves that you don't touch at such moments.
And it did anger the French, as we know, but we also know that this isn't the first time that a leader is calling for Aliyah.
Ariel Sharon did it as well.
Exactly.
And he was equally reprimanded at that time. But the way I saw and I listened to the speech of the president, I must say, it was extremely moving. The way that he addressed each one of the victims, the way that he reminded each one what their past had been. And the way he said, yes, but we understand also that you have a right to live as free citizens in the countries that you choose. And indeed, it is the duty of the governments of those countries to ensure your security.
And to express their religious beliefs.
That's correct.
Which today isn't the case.
You know, one of the things that was stated publicly, I think yesterday, I'm losing control of time, by the French Prime Minister, was to remind us all that it was after the French Revolution that the French people decided to emancipate the Jews, to give them equal rights, and that this business of La République and what you call in France laïcité, in a way it's secularism. Secularism, the fact that you're a citizen and you're not counted by your religion and that this has to be a secular state, has become in a way a religion of France, the ideology of France. So I think that governments usually don't make the difference between religions. But yes, some of us are still targeted everywhere where we are. And we have to be very, very vigilant and take precautions about that.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining me here, Ambassador Vital. Mr. Frenkel, this was a special edition here at i24 News. We'll be back here in just a few moments with more guests and more questions, and of course with live coverage from the funerals. Thank you for joining us.
בלב ליבו של הרובע היהודי. הוא נשבע בקסמיה של צרפת וערכי החירות והדמוקרטיה המייחדים אותה. לימים, בית הכנסת שהקים שרד את השואה, ואנשיו היו חלק מקהילה יהודית.
היי.
אוקיי, ברוך השם.
נעשה סאונד צ'ק אולי הפעם?
יותר טוב שלא ישמעו אותנו.
אנחנו עוד דקה באוויר. גם אני מאמינה שיש כאן דברים משותפים.
ספרי לי.
Good afternoon. We're back here with the i24 News special edition with the live coverage from the funerals in Jerusalem of the 4 victims from the Paris attack. Joining me now in studio is Ambassador Daniel Sheikh, former Israeli ambassador to France, and Rafael Yerushalmi, former Israeli intelligence officer. Thank you for being here with me this afternoon. We just heard the speeches of both President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu. A very emotional day for French Jews, for Jews around the world, and in fact, a very emotional day for a lot of people who believe in the values of freedom of speech, because this all began with the attack at Charlie Hebdo. Ambassador Sheikh, I'd like to begin with you. Hollande feared that Netanyahu's presence at the rally that was held with many world leaders would evoke perhaps other subjects and kind of tilt the shift and the focus to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Based on your personal experience as Israel's ambassador, does this claim represent Israeli-French relations at the time, and more so the direction these relations are going?
I have to start by saying that I don't know that those are facts. Nobody knows for a fact that this was indeed the message that came from Hollande's office. But I'd like to say, regardless of support or no support for Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think it's not a reasonable thing to demand from an Israeli Prime Minister not to be present in such an event, if indeed that was the case. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu should indeed have been in the front row of these world leaders who were marching in Paris. What might have been the case is maybe a case of bad precedent, since Prime Minister Netanyahu already traveled to France in the wake of a murderous attack in Toulouse, and it was again 2 years ago during an election campaign, and some felt that he took advantage of this tragedy in order to fuel his campaign. I will leave it to each of our viewers to judge if he did the same thing in this case or not. But I think the bottom line is what counts. I think an Israeli personality, maybe it should have been the president, a less political figure, a more symbolic one, but it is definitely the right and the prerogative of the Prime Minister to claim this role as the representative of the State of Israel at such an event.
Absolutely, and I have to say that even some of the other candidates who were asked whether his presence was welcomed, I've heard a vast amount of response saying that there should have been.
I think everybody is agreed.
In the place, the timing,
you might argue that maybe the presence of 2 more cabinet ministers, each from a different party, may not have been crucial. But the main figure, the Prime Minister, I think even head of the opposition, Bougie Herzog, had no claim against that.
Absolutely. We're going to quickly go for a live update from our diplomatic correspondent, Tal Shalev, who's standing by at the funeral. Tal, what's the latest?
Well, Michal, the funeral is underway. We have already heard the Israeli president and the Israeli prime minister and the head of the leader of the opposition, Yitzhak Herzog. All of them gave the address. In a short while, the French representative minister, the ecology minister, and former presidential candidate in 2007, Ségolène Royal, will be speaking to the crowds. There's a very large crowd here, comprised mainly out of the French Jewish community, but also from many Israeli citizens who have arrived here by themselves. This is actually, as Mr. Sheikh, as Ambassador Sheikh mentioned, this is the second time in a few years, in almost 3 years, that the French community is having such a tragic event, such a tragic funeral here at the cemetery in March 2012. Also, the victims of the Toulouse attack were brought to final rest here, and the similarities are very clear. Even though when I remember and when I recall speaking to the French jury that was that attended that funeral and those who are attending this funeral, you can definitely feel a different trend coming, a different feelings. It does seem that this event has increased the fear, has increased the concern, and in many ways might encourage, as many in the French government are concerned, it might encourage a much more vast majority, a much more vast and swift immigration, wave of immigration to Israel.
Thank you, Tal Shalev, for that update. And indeed, we did speak about a wave of immigration and the call for aliyah that is being made at this moment. And I'd like to hear your opinion, Ambassador Sheikh, as someone who's lived and who knows the culture in France. What is your opinion about aliyah at this time? Of course, all Jews are welcome to Israel, but right now, calling for aliyah, what message is this sending? And more so, is there a future for French Jews in France?
Well, if the answer were no to that question, then I think the French Republic had no right to exist anymore. And I think that that is the view that Israelis should take of it. These are French citizens of Jewish faith who are profoundly connected to Israel in this order. And that's the healthy order for them to live in France. The responsibility for their well-being, for the fact that they will be welcome in the community, is the responsibility of French authority and of the French society. And I think that in the wake of an unprecedented show of solidarity and of attachment to the core values of French society, which include the emancipation of the Jews, it is an unfair treatment to accuse the French of not being attentive enough to the well-being of the Jewish community. I think that President Hollande, every French dignitary, the press, the intellectual elites, all of them have embraced the Jewish community. And moreover, I know for a fact that that is how the Jews in France consider it. Now, having said all that, there are many Jews in France who want to come to Israel. And we should all, as Israelis, I think it's the most natural thing that we should welcome them with open arms. But I think it puts them in an uncomfortable position if we are those who are pushing them. They don't need to be pushed. Those who want to come are convinced for better reasons than just an attack in a Jewish supermarket.
So in a moment, I do want to talk again a little more about the feeling of safety of the Jewish community in France. But Mr. Yerushalmi, I'm wondering what your opinion is on the deployment of thousands of troops in France, on the streets, in institutions. For Israelis, maybe this sounds normal, but in Europe, this is completely unique, and I don't know if unique's the word, it's completely not a part of the usual landscape. Do you think this is a new reality that people will have to deal with?
I do think so. I think the French have to understand now that they are in danger. They haven't done it in the past. They have procrastinated for quite a few years, as maybe they are ready to face the reality and to face the enemy. I have not noticed yet that they are naming the enemy as such yet. They are still using a kind of vocabulary that shows that they are still cautious. They hesitate to use certain terms as Arab or Islamic or terrorist even. They still use militant. And to point something that Ambassador Sheikh said, you have to remember that the Jews do not feel that good in France lately. But it has nothing to do with security or the French Republic. It has to do with an overall atmosphere, mostly because of the French media, that continuously attacks Israel, continuously accuses the Israeli government or even the Israeli army of war crimes, continuously only takes the side of the Palestinians.
Well, it's hard to make such a generalization, but some people do feel this way.
Believe me, as a journalist, you should know it. If you take the French media, it's 80% of the French media are anti-Israeli, and that's it. Whether it's Le Monde, whether it's Libération, Antenne 2, in England it's the BBC. They just had a scandal, one of the many scandals. The Jewish communities in England, in France, and especially in Belgium, where there it's for sure a very strong anti-Israeli press. The Jews there are not very happy with that. They open their newspapers to see terrible accusations of Israel.
But Mr. Yerushalmi, I don't think that the media is the basis of their feelings. And I'd like to pose a question to both of you, asking what can the government do and how should they act right now to ensure that feeling of safety? Because not everyone is going to make aliyah, and the media is a tool of free speech, so we cannot change the media, but the government can take certain actions.
The measures are very simple. The first measure, even though it might look psychological to deploy so many troops around, that these troops should be visible, or these policemen, it's very good. It keeps people on a state of alert. People will be more vigilant because they see there is some kind of danger if there are so many troops around. It gives them a kind of feeling of safety, which is good, to avoid panic or fear. On the other hand, other measures, real measures, have to be taken. The first one, we have mentioned the efficiency or inefficiency of the security service of France. Their efficiency is not in question. There is a problem of budget and a problem of staff. The government has immediately to vote much more budget and devote much more staff and train more staff to fight terrorism. They also have to change the legislation in France.
Okay, and just if we can get a quick also comment from Ambassador Sheikh, and then we're going to go live.
Well, I'm much less an expert on the exact measures to be taken, but I think that they need to be on three levels. They need to be on the policing, military, intelligence, law enforcement side, definitely. They need to be in legislation, but they also need to be on social and educational issues.
We're going to listen to the Tikva and we'll be right back with you.
להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
תם הטקס, מסע הלוויה יוצא כעת לחלקה הדרומית, הקהל מתבקש.
That was the end of the funeral ceremony. We're back here in studio with Ambassador Sheikh and Mr. Yerushalmi. Thanks for being here, staying with me. Again, I'd like to talk about what we left off with, what the government can do, because I don't mean it just in a security standpoint. There is a clear divide in society, which is just widening. What can the government do at this point to not only retrieve the sense of security for French citizens, because it's not just a Jewish problem. The attack, to remind you, last week began with the attack on Charlie Hebdo, which was not Jewish, and of course later on a Jewish supermarket was targeted specifically, but this is more about citizens at large and citizens of the West who believe in free speech. Is it too late? You know, is there something that the government could do at this point, or you know, maybe at this point the military enforcement is the only way? More forces on the street.
No, I mean, it is a necessary measure, but it's not sufficient. Look, after 9/11, worldwide travel habits have changed. People got used to more stringent security controls in airports, to more intrusive questioning on also when they apply for a visa. All sorts of things changed. I think that things will have to change in France too. I'm not in a position to tell you exactly what. That's not my domain. But I think that if some kind of mental penny must drop in the minds of French citizens today, it is that this event will necessarily have an impact on their everyday life, and they have to accept it. On the other hand, if you strip yourself of all the freedoms and the values of freedom of expression, freedom of movement, human rights, etc., in order to fight your enemies, then what are you fighting for?
And
so
then
you need to
lost.
strike a balance. It's very simple. A liberal democracy has every right to acquire the tools and the weapons to defend itself, but it shouldn't go overboard.
Now, the entire the value system and the idea of the European Union, free and open borders, maybe this is also something that it's at stake. But the question is this really a moment that will change? People are comparing it to 9/11, but it's not exactly the same scale. Will it have the same impact and the same imprint on the French history, or will this be, sorry to say, maybe forgotten in a few days, a tragic event that took place, and life will move on until the next tragic event takes place?
Hopefully this scenario might not be the best one, but maybe it's not such a bad one, that people will go back to their lives and forget. Those who should not forget, and that's what I hoped this huge demonstration in Paris might have done, with some public opinion pressure, is the leaders, those who are responsible for security, and the leaders. They shouldn't forget. We speak a lot about what happened in France, but it's a world problem. France cannot fight it alone. France cannot solve it alone, even for its own internal security. It has to be dealt with in an international manner, in a cooperation with all the countries that are threatened by jihad. And it is true, like Ambassador Sheikh said, that the root of the problem lies very deep, and there are many measures who should be long-term measures, starting with education, changing the atmosphere in the society, creating more tolerance, more understanding, examining Islam in a new light. All these things are very, very long-term measures. Meanwhile, there is an emergency situation. The emergency situation requires an immediate military response, because the root of the problem, as we said, very deep, is not in France. The root of the problem is here in Syria and Iraq. And it needs an immediate military measure that doesn't threaten in any way democracy. Maybe the new measures at the borders, many countries, principally Spain, have asked to tighten the controls at the borders, change the Schengen arrangements that allow European citizens to move free across all the borders. They want to slow that down. Some measures create an ethical dilemma as to how far you can go to protect your security as threatening human freedom and privacy. But a military operation against ISIS, worldwide collaboration of intelligence services to fight Al-Qaeda is absolutely required. It hasn't been done until now in a serious manner, in a concerted manner. All the countries have to gather. France cannot be alone. It's not in a vacuum. It has allies. They have to work together, and they have to target, first of all, the military target, because that can be done in a few weeks, in a few months, but that problem can be dealt with.
We'll talk a little bit more about the intelligence side, but first we'll get a quick update from our correspondent Danny Swibel, who's standing within the funeral. It looks like people are starting to spread and leave the premises. What can you tell us from inside? It's been a very charged and emotional past hour. What's happening inside, and as far as the mood and the people and the reactions you've been hearing, Danny?
Well, Michal, as you can imagine, it's a very somber atmosphere here. Hundreds of people came out and gathered. Some people bared Israeli flags. Other people had signs. you could imagine the signs that we've seen over the course of the week. Je suis Charlie, je suis Juif, I am Charlie, I'm Jewish, as well as I am Yoav and Johan, two of the victims in the butcher shop on Friday. We got to hear from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the Israeli President, family members of the people, some of the victims had spoken and had really saddened words. We spoke to friends of Yoav and Johan, two of the victims, and they were obviously still in shock, still in complete dismay over what had happened. So as it stands, we are currently getting ready for the funeral procession, and we will update you as things progress here.
Danny, how did people react to the speeches? Very charged. President Rivlin was speaking individually about every victim. Both the president and the prime minister mentioned Aliyah. What did you see in the crowd?
The crowd was touched. The crowd was touched by some of the things the president had said specifically, as well as some points from Benjamin Netanyahu over the unity of Jews worldwide, that Jews are an ancient people who persevere through these things, and together that people will persevere. Some of the French people I'd spoken to appreciated that Israel is the home of all Jews, and that Israel looks at itself as a moral beacon. But mostly I noticed people were extremely touched by some of the families who had spoke. The wife of Philippe Raham spoke, and Philippe had 3 children at home, so people here were definitely devastated. You could see it in their actions and you could see it in their eyes that they were crushed by, the falling of this person on Friday. And that's where it stands here on the ground.
Thank you, Danny. We'll be back with you for more updates. Back here at the studio. Ambassador Sheikh, French politics will clearly be affected by these past week's attacks, 2 attacks, which might even bring to the rise, and we're already seeing it, of more right-wing extremism within the political parties. What do you expect to happen politically? There's still some time. The French elections will be held in 2017, but what do you think will happen in the coming months, in the coming years?
The natural course of events, unfortunately, is that extremes feed on each other. So the more extreme the Islamic terrorism becomes, or the behavior of the Muslim community, the more it feeds into the extreme right, and vice versa. That's the natural course of events. And that is why it's so important for President Hollande to follow through in the leadership that he has shown so far in the public domain, in the ceremonial, emotional, symbolic domain of the Great March, and to take charge of what is happening and not leave the debate about immigration, about the Muslim community, in the hands of the extremists. He can do it. I think that today French society is clearly more ripe and to understand the necessity of such a debate in the mainstream of politics, and that goes for the Socialist Party of President Hollande, but also for the main opposition party, the right-wing UMP. It may be a moment of truth for President Hollande. He has done very well so far, but the big test lies ahead.
And how would you react to the rise of Pegida in Germany? Just last night there was a rally, an anti-Islam rally, the rise of Marine Le Pen. How is society going to react to these events? It's, as you said, it's the natural way to go, but the rise of extremism, where is this going to take Europe?
Marine Le Pen and the Front National weren't born last weekend. I mean, they exist for many, many years, and their rise in power is not directly linked only to the question of Muslim immigration. It's one of the issues. But the main issue that they are feeding on is the economic crisis, the social crisis, the identity crisis that French society is going through. And of course, the events of last weekend, of the last week, feed into that. And that's exactly why I'm saying it's important for the mainstream political leaders to take charge of this political debate and not leave it in the hands of the extremists.
Especially that they feed on racism, and that they will add hold Muslims or Jews of France responsible. They will always say that the problems that France is suffering are because of the foreigners,
yes.
the others, and the non-French.
And for the sake of the debate, the Jews are just as others as the Muslims.
Yeah, and not only the National Front was not born yesterday, extremism and xenophobia in France have a very long-standing tradition. I would say from the Dreyfus affair, you can see that France has always been divided in two camps on that matter.
Absolutely. Now, I think you can say most immigrants have assimilated. They're proud Frenchmen. Many immigrants who came and were able to have a new life because of the immigration policies there that currently hold. But the problem is that some who are second, third, fourth generation have not. And there are entire communities and neighborhoods that are completely detached. And how can the government deal with a situation where there's two completely different realities taking place in one country?
Well, I think both sides bear responsibility for that development, for the situation that you just described. Both the French state, who neglected the effort needed in order to integrate the first generation and second generation of immigrants, and then the third and the fourth feel completely neglected and out of the loop from French society. But there's also a responsibility that lies on the shoulders of the immigrants themselves, who in many cases, not all of them of course, but in many cases, don't want to integrate. They don't want to be French. They want to be Algerians, Moroccans who live in France. They just want to a geographical.
Some don't even speak.
Many of them don't speak
language.
French. They don't feel solidary in any way to French values, etc. So the trick is to now. I think the biggest challenge is to try and associate the majority of moderate, peace-seeking Muslim immigrants into the effort to fight the extremists. You have to pull them into your camp and not let them drift into the wake of the extremist preachers and terrorists.
Are there success stories as far as immigration?
Well, maybe there are many. Yes,
of course, many success stories. You wouldn't, the same way as you couldn't dream of a black American president a few years ago, you couldn't dream of a Muslim woman Minister of Justice.
Absolutely, Rashida Dati.
Rashida Dati. Yes. This was unthinkable a few years ago. If I may say, I would be very careful. We're speaking of racism, amalgam. I would be very careful of analyzing this problem through the lens of integration.
So we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back here in just 2 minutes in this i24 News special edition. Thank you. Don't go anywhere. Good afternoon. We're still here at the I24 News Special Edition, and still in studio is Mr. Yerushalmi. Thank you for still being here with me, and Dr. Miriam Rosman, who joined us, an expert on France-Israel relations, very relevant right now, and we'll be hearing a lot about what you have to say. Just before the break, we were discussing some of the immigration, and we were cut off, so perhaps you'd like to finish. We were talking about the immigration and the second, third, and fourth generation in France and how they can integrate within society.
Right. First of all, I would say that the Muslim community has pretty well integrated in the French society. And what we see the most visible is the bad side of that community, and we never see really all the rest. It is integrated, but even that part that is not integrated, that remains disconnected, sometimes willingly, ideologically or religiously, I would be careful not to point always the finger towards it, because we have a tendency to think that the terrorists, for instance, or the extremists are only recruited in that layer of society in the suburbs of Paris. And it is true, there are many petty thieves, many delinquents living in those areas. But saying this is the place where terrorists are recruited is not exactly true. I will remind you, like, for instance, here in our region, that many students in campuses coming from the middle and upper middle class are very virulent followers of jihad, of extremist movements, the same way as we have Palestinian students in Haifa, Jerusalem, Ramallah supporting Hamas.
So the ideology isn't just with the
there are
very
Muslim intellectuals in
part.
France who are moderate, but there are many of them who are not, who are outspoken leaders, outspoken orators, that they certainly do not come from the suburbs. So I think that's yet another prejudice we should avoid, even though there is, for sure, an integration problem.
Only.
But the French might say today, isn't there an integration problem if Jews ask to be buried in Jerusalem?
Absolutely, it's a good question to be asked. Dr. Rosman, how will these events and this past week, which is still keeping a lot of people in shock, affect Israeli-French relations?
Actually, I hope it's going to calm down, because from my point of view, what Netanyahu did on Saturday, and it started like a boule de neige, we say in French, it started to fall. It's
snowball.
not. Yeah, snowball. Thank you. Actually, Sharon did it before in 2002, and Chirac was very upset with this, and there was a lot of stories behind it. The speech of Netanyahu on La Victoire on Sunday was a bit less firm like it was on Saturday, but still, I think Israel, if they want to come, welcome. I'll be the first one to be happy if they come, but it's their choice. It's not us who has to come and to tell them. And I have to say one figure. In 2014, there were 7,000 immigrants from Jewish community in France who came to Israel. It's doubled, because in 2013 there were 3,000 and something, and before the attack, I say before Friday, there was supposed to be 10,000 in 2015. And we have to remember something more. It's not just anti-Semitism. Of course, it is also one of the triggers, but the economic in France is in a very bad situation. The whole social situation in France is not good. So, and I think this is something that we have to take in account.
But it's interesting because economically in Israel, it's also a very big question. Where will they work? People here aren't, jobs aren't exactly flourishing. So even in Israel, a lot are quick to make aliyah, but I wouldn't say that it seems that the economy isn't the main reason. And speaking to people in the French Jewish community, it's more a feeling of urgency and fear that's causing them to get up and leave. But back to the political aspect and whatever implications this can have on Israeli and French relations. France seemed angered by some of the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu said. And what I'm wondering is, the rally, which of course we mentioned here earlier was very important for Israeli presence, was the invitation to President Abbas, a certain hint to Israel.
From my point of view, first of all, for this demonstration should be another delegation of Israel. I think instead of Lieberman and Netanyahu having this small fight under quotation, who will go and if they will go, I think they should have prepared another delegation, like President Rivlin should be there and other dignitaries from my point of view. That's what I think personally. Obviously, during the demonstration, we've seen some things which disturbed me as an Israeli, and I'm not going to repeat them. All of us saw them. But, and I think there is another symbol. François Hollande left La Victoire before Netanyahu's speech. It's another issue, it's saying something without saying, but Ségolène Royal is the minister who came to speak today, and she is somebody who is very known in Israel because she was running for presidency, but her speech was very moderate, she was very warm, she really maybe in a way calmed, they send someone who won't put some more fire, but calm down the things. And again, I don't think it's not the role of Israel to tell them to come. They're welcome. Obviously, there will be problem. One thing I agree with Mr. Netanyahu that he said on Saturday, we have to build a bureau. We have to build kind of a bureau to help them, because right now there's lots of problem with this aliyah. It's a very good aliyah, wealthy. They have professions. There are problems with their degrees here. There are problems with the doctors. There are problems with different kind of professions. And if we really want to help them to integrate in our society, what we should do is really build a bureau and to help them, but not to tell them to come. They have to do their own choice. And some of them are not coming to Israel. Some of them are leaving France for the States or for Canada. And it's their choice.
It's an important time perhaps for the governments to cooperate, because if we go back not that long ago, a week, it was really an attack on the values that Israel and France do share. Now, I'd like to talk about the intelligence aspect, which you're a former intelligence officer. Reports that came in, which haven't been confirmed, but Algerian intelligence services told France one day before the attack on Charlie Hebdo that there was an attack to take place within 24 hours. They even sent the identities of the attackers. And if this is correct, it's a very, very big and severe intelligence failure. So
well, the answer is very simple. It depends who and at what level of the chain of command received that message. Who was in a position reading it to understand it fully, to take a decision. The decision can just be to show it to somebody else or to push it up the echelons. This is the main question, if this is true. Who received the message? Through what channels? The point is that in the present state of things, it is any information you get of that nature should, of course, be dealt with seriously. Every hoax should not be considered a hoax before it's sure it's a hoax. The cooperation between most services is very tight right now. We said there is a need for more, but it does exist. It exists in the secret services, Interpol, many establishments, intelligence security establishments collaborate, and that might create an overflow of information. The Israelis might have come with information, the Americans might have come with information. Maybe there is, I'm sorry to say, sometimes a bit of snobbery. If you get an information for the Mossad, you will look at it more than from the Algerians. No offense, but that's how it works. So all this creates probably a lot of information. Today, the cyber war is absolutely ginormous. There are millions of people employed in attacking and defending internet sites and computer networks.
A main subject worldwide.
And in that, you lose a little the focus on the main things, on what could be an emergency and what is not an emergency. In that particular case, I will say, flow of information. Maybe it was lost in it. Maybe the person who received it is not senior enough to understand the full scope. That's my possible explanation.
We'll talk about this a little more, but first we're going to go live to our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev, who is standing by right outside where the funeral is held. Tal, please give us an update.
Well, Michal, the official part of the ceremony is over, and now the families and relatives and friends are accompanying the 4 victims of the Hyper Kasher attack to their final rest. The bodies are being transferred to the graves that are in a different part of the Har HaMenuchot cemetery where this ceremony and funeral has been taking place. It was a very dignified and very moving, emotional ceremony. We heard statements from the Israeli President Reuven Rivlin, who says that terror never kept the Jewish people down, but we will not let it subdue us today. And he also tells the French Jews that terror should not subdue them and that Israel is their home. We hear the Israeli Prime Minister reiterate the message that leaders of the world are now starting to understand the grave danger for all mankind, not only for the Jewish people, that the terror of the radical Islam is imposing. And we also hear the French representative, the former presidential candidate and current ecology minister, Ségolène Royal, who does say, vow that France will fight anti-Semitism, but also declares that the French president will be giving the 4 victims of this attack the highest medal honor of the French Legionary Army. And this is, of course, a very strong act of solidarity and of unity coming from the French government. Even though all of the victims are not Israeli citizens, the Israeli Prime Minister did offer and insist to bring them to their final burial here in Israel, and they have been brought to rest here in the Har HaMenuchot cemetery in a very tragic way, a place that is already well known to French jury from almost 3 years ago, when the victims of the Toulouse school attack were also brought to final rest here.
Tal, do you think today marks a warming in Israeli-French relations?
Well, I think this whole event does touch and does catch Israel and France and Jerusalem and Paris in the midst of a very tense diplomatic era. In the past few months, the French president has been, and French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius have been being very much more involved in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and not in the way that causes much satisfaction here in Jerusalem. France has been very supportive of the Palestinian statehood UN Security Council bid, and this has caused a lot of anger here in Jerusalem. And it was also a very tense visit this week by the Israeli Prime Minister to France. I wouldn't take this event and reflect on it, try to define from these hours, these very painful hours of grieving and not hours of politics. And even though politics was very much present in the past few days during Netanyahu's visit to France, today at the funeral it was much more subtle. You could not you could not really feel the politics, but much more the collective pain and the collective embrace that the Israeli society is also embracing these victims.
Thank you very much, Tal Shalev, for this update from the funeral. Unfortunately, this is wrapping up our time. This is all the time we have. Thank you very much, Mr. Rafael Yerushalmi, for your insight and for being here. And thank you, Dr. Miriam Roseman, for your insight and for being with us really all week, telling us and giving us more insight on the Israeli-French relations, which hopefully are going in a good and warming direction, as Tal mentioned, from Jerusalem. This has been a very emotional day for many in Israel, in France, and worldwide, for anyone who believes in the same core values that were attacked. We're going to end with visuals from the funeral. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here for this i24 News special edition. Thank you for watching.